Welcome to World of DaaS, a show for data enthusiasts. I'm your host, Auren Hoffman, CEO of SafeGraph. For more conversations, videos, and transcripts, visit safegraph.com/podcasts. My guest today is Jack Dangermond. Jack is the CEO of Esri, the biggest GIS software company with over 1.3 billion in yearly revenues. Welcome, Jack, to the podcast.
Hey, nice to see you, Auren. Very nice
to see you as well. Now, I have a lot of questions about data, but before we get in there, I think it'd be really great to get, for our listeners to really understand Esri itself, because Esri, it might be the most unique company, at least a large company in the world that I know. And so, you and your wife, Laura, founded Esri in 1969, which is 52 years ago, which is amazing. And the company's been around longer than really a lot of other well-known tech giants, longer than Microsoft, longer than Apple, longer than Oracle, even longer than SAP. Is there some sort of non-obvious endurance lesson that other companies can learn from Esri?
Well, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. Were you born 50 years ago, Auren? That's what I want to know.
I was not yet. I am pretty old, but I was not yet born, no.
Well, I think we started it very humbly, just as a little professional consulting practice out when we left Harvard. And it was, we were really quite scared about what we were doing. We started doing little projects and we didn't borrow money, so we kept it quite simple. We continued to own it, and we grew what I guess I'd call a sustainable company with a sustainable business model where, we do work like hell, then get paid and then spend the money. It's simple, like running your own household. And as we've continued working over the years, we kept some basic principles of never borrow money, don't go into debt, don't take venture capital, those sort of things, largely out of just feeling uncomfortable with doing that.
Is there something Esri today is still 100% owned by you and Laura, which is really extremely rare for like a company that does over $1 billion in revenues. And there's no outside investors, no liquidity events, no going public, no things like stock options and stuff. Is there advice you would give to people starting their companies today or thinking about their companies today that is maybe different from the conventional advice, raise $100 million, go fast, et cetera?
Well, it depends upon what you really want to do, what your intentions are. Our intention was really to be, I guess, mission focused. We were interested in applying quantitative tools to environmental problem solving and land use planning. And out of that intention came the development of tools, analytic tools, mapping tools. And so it's all about intention. I don't want to get into what we do so much, but I think young people who are wanting to start a business have to understand what they intend to do. If it's about making money, probably the formulas that are popular in the Silicon Valley of, taking venture capital, going round one, round two, selling out, all that kind of stuff is probably the way to do it. But for us, that was not so interesting. What was interesting is taking what we had developed and learned in the academy and seeing if we could really make a difference with it. So that's maybe one thought that I have is make sure you're clear on what you really intend to do in your life.
But it's hard to, as a young person in their 20s, it's kind of hard to know what you want to do in your life. Or do you think people can should they first figure that out? Or
I don't know. It's hard to say because everybody's different. They have different intentions. So I'm not saying that my route or what we did is some rule book that everybody should follow, but we've been quite successful by remaining focused on our main purpose, which is to, initially it was about doing projects ourselves. And later, as we built software tools and sold the software tools, it was shifted over to supporting our users, helping them do their work better. That's really the fundamentals of it. And the organization changed in a way in its culture to be user-focused and purpose-focused at the same time, and also have a kind of a culture of service. My parents were in service. My mother was a maid, my father was a gardener, and we all grew up in a family of being in service. They started a little business, a nursery business, and that culture, I think, carried over to us years later, and it's embedded here. So we have, we have about 5,000 employees in our US business, but we have about 12,000 employees around the world. And these little companies that we helped spawn off, Esri France, Esri Germany, Esri Australia, they also have embraced the same culture that we have, which is, of course, to be a strong business. But also to focus on really wanting to make the world a better place through the actual technology that we create and support.
I mean, a lot of Esri employees have had a really long tenure. I've worked with a lot of different people at Esri that have been there for 30 years, but the company has changed dramatically in those 30 years. How have you worked with your own employees to help them grow and help those employees change as the company changes?
Well, I said that we are user focused and customer focused. I suppose that's something that everybody says, we're user focused, customer focused, but we actually mean it. The purpose of the company is actually to make them do their work better in all of these geographic application fields. The second purpose of the company is really to be a great place to work. So people to come to work here and we have a very, very low turnover rate, and it's hard to get in, I have to say. It's not just apply for a job. And we screen people a lot, and once they're in, we really work on growing them as individuals. So we have heavy subsidies on education programs. And we really want to be a kind of, people again say these words nowadays, kind of irritates me, but a kind of learning organization. We are a learning organization. So all of us keep, including myself, I study like hell, I work like hell, and keep trying to do better. That's sort of our culture. It's a culture of also seeing things, wanting to see things holistically and systematically. And we apply our science, the science of geography and GIS tools, to really support that purpose. So people get all in here, including me. You get excited about it, and it's hard to, a lot of people don't find a cool thing to really work on. And so you can have a lot of philosophy, but you don't really have something that's really as neat as this to work on. So we're lucky in that sense.
Well, one of the things I find really fascinating about Esri is you go to most companies, successful companies, and you go to the About Us page on their website, and it lists their management team, and it goes through and talks about the different people, and this person runs sales, this is the CFO. Esri doesn't have that. In fact, it's somewhat opaque. It's kind of hard to know who's running what. There's no executives that are listed. There's non-obvious titles for leaders. Someone's called a director, and sometimes a director actually is the third most important person in the business or something. That might be an EVP at most companies. Is there some intentionality around that? Is it The Economist, which doesn't list the bylines on people's articles? Have you thought that? Is there some sort of specific reason you've designed the organization like that?
The intention is really to run an organization where everybody's respected and there's lots of teams. So how we run it is in a collection of teams. So it's a network of teams that are collaborating and the more, we don't incentivize our salespeople either. For example, there's no incentives to try to take advantage of our customers through selling or something.
No, you just get paid a base, no commission.
Yeah, people are paid on the hours that they work.
Yeah.
Which is very fair. People work more hours, they get paid more.
You pay hourly rather than a salary or something?
Yeah, not all employees, but most of them work that way. And people are very respectful of that. So it's a flat organization, as they say, and it's a flat network of teams. And some people take leadership positions, and some are, like you say, they're really senior. And there's about 16, I think there's 16 directors that run the major operations. And they are both our board. We don't have an outside board. We have actually operating board internally. And these people help each other across the organization. And, they're their own critics. And we have outside influence as well, especially with our users. But I don't have a clear way to answer you. if you wanted me to go to a whiteboard and write out and lay out the organizational structure of the company, I could do so. And it's really all about who takes leadership responsibility for different segments of the organization. So I suppose we could expose ourselves better to the world in that sense. But by not paying attention to, position, what occurs is that people are more open and interactive and sharing with each other. And we try to minimize these sort of incentives for self-identification. I really don't like that as a culture. I like really more of a collegial style of culture, and that tends to, it tends to be more healthy and friendly as an organization. And I suppose if it's more organized, you could go drive, and maybe it is more efficient. But in terms of a place to work, it's not so much fun.
The hourly thing is interesting too. So most let's say technology companies, they just pay people like a yearly salary. Somebody makes X dollars per year. Maybe there's a bonus or something like involved or something like that. And sometimes they're working, sometimes they may be working under 40 hours a week. Sometimes they're working way more than 40 hours a week.
Right.
And maybe their salary goes up, year by year based on like their performance and stuff. The hourly thing is pretty interesting. So, someone, you might have someone who maybe needs more of a flex hour or something like that. Mm-hmm. Where someone, they may have ability for whatever reason in their lifestyle to work more than 40 hours a week. And then they basically get the advantage of that. Is that the way you think about it?
Yeah. There's exempt employees, that have caps and non-exempt employees that have caps of how many hours they can work. And we place very strict attention to all of the labor laws and regulations on that. But when I was a student at Harvard, I worked in a basement. They paid me $5 an hour. And I thought it was really fantastic because I actually can put my way through school by working all night and then going to school in the daytime. And the more I would work, the better off I was able to be. And it was, they trusted me. I had to have integrity with the university. But it was really neat, and it sort of lifted some of the burden of check in, check out sorts of operations. So that has just sort of permeated here from the very beginning, and it has created a stable workforce. It's very fair because sometimes you have to work 80 hours a week, and I do it still. And your spouse gets mad at you, and you say, "Well, yeah, but by the way, the paycheck is twice as large."
Yeah. So that's actually.
And so in a way, it's it really is neat because people can really work hard and they're rewarded in that sense for
in real
great
time.
work.
Yeah, rather than
a
year later in your performance.
A year later, if you did good, Johnny, you might get a raise or something. No,
it's immediate.
And I can, what it does for me as a manager is I can ask people things like, "Would you help me, on this thing?" And turns out we have to stay up all night or something. And people are absolutely not disincentivized from it.
Right.
It takes all that negativities that normally in normal companies away. And I think people are very respectful of the privilege of having that. They really are. And it takes time, but it's very important.
I think that's super fascinating. Another thing I'm super fascinated about Esri is that how flat the org is. You personally seem to be extremely accessible. We have thousands and thousands of employees. I mean, my anecdote was the first time I was on the Esri campus, I was meeting with a BD person at the company, and we were having a good conversation. This is just when we were starting SafeGraph, and the person's like, "Hey, do you want to meet Jack?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, one day I would love to meet him. He's someone I admire. I would love to meet him." And then he actually just took me out of the conference room and walked me into your office. You were just there working. You're at a stand-up desk work. I still remember, just in the middle of working on something. He somehow felt like he had the right to interrupt you and just walk me in there and do that. I don't even know that most 100-person companies would be run that way, but even in thousands of people, it was flat enough where he felt like he could do that. How do you even figure out how to protect your time, or how to, obviously if employees were always interrupting you, you would never be able to get anything done. So how do they even know like when they could do that? And this was not like a high level person I was meeting with. This was a mid-level person in the organization. Like if that person has the ability, then almost anyone can do it. So how do you manage that?
I don't know. People become respectful, okay? I mean, if they're wasting your time, I don't make them feel guilty or anything, but they figure it out that that's not a good use of their time. I mean, or of my time. So that's just the way it is. I had the great privilege of spending some time last week with President Obama. Now, I'm greatly nervous because, I'm wasting his time. He has a lot of really important things to do. And he's doing just amazing work, by the way, in his so-called retirement. But I mean, so anyone would feel that way. There's the emotion of being in the presence of a kind of God. But then there's also just, I don't want to waste his time. And I think if you make yourself accessible, people go that way in this organization. And also, I'm very respectful of their time, and the ability to support them is important. And I think a characteristic of great managers is to support the employees. It's not to be the boss. That maybe make some people ego happy, but it's really I don't think it's very productive. Be humble, be supportive. That's your job. Figure out how you can help them do their work better.
That's really interesting. You mentioned earlier another thing that's like different about Esri is you have this kind of like in some ways this franchise model. You mentioned like Esri France, Esri Australia, and something. Is there some sort of like, how do you think about, is there a history of how that happened, and how do you think about these like sister companies?
We sort of invent a lot of things here ourselves, and working with another small software company at the time in the early 80s, this fellow, Henry Cochran, told me about how he distributed his software overseas, and it was through so-called distributors. That's the name that he said. We didn't really call it a franchise model, but ultimately it becomes that, where we either independent of us or we make a small investment in an international organization. Like
it's kind of like a JV between like a parent and a team on the ground or something like that.
And it really is important, I think, for our work, because our partners in each country are exclusive in the country. They're really part of the culture. They take our tools and they care about their own country. They languageize the tools, they internationalize the tools. They support the customers passionately because it's their country, and they're my partners. So almost none of them have changed over the roughly 40 years that we've done this, and they've grown to be $100 million operations in their respective countries. And so actually is a much larger company than it shows financially. We have a huge financial footprint, but it's all through partnerships. And that's really been very stable. It's allowed us to be able to come up with high quality standards here and then transfer them over, whether it's in marketing or in how we do business development, or how we do training, or how we do tech support. We have something called Esri University, where we bring these people together. We all learn together. They share also how it's going in different markets and where we're being strong and where we're not. So it's a family, like a global family. And I have so many things to tell you about that that we don't have time to do, but I think it's created a kind of mini UN in terms of friendship and business collaboration around the world.
And have you, like, because usually these, like, when you have these parents and you have franchises, it's both a collaboration, but if you think of like McDonald's or something, like, there's also this tension that can exist. In your case, is the way, one of the reasons you have maybe less tension is because you just have these long relationships with these people and they've built partnerships and friendships from it, or how do you manage that?
I don't know the reason why it all works so well. Friendship is most important, I think. And this philosophy of wanting to help them do a great business in their country. And, businesses go up and down in different countries, inflation, rapid inflation in Argentina. How do you get through?
Yep.
Carrying through and helping them and helping our users in a country like that when they're in deep trouble, giving them continuity. Okay, those are the bad times, but they come back.
Yep.
The world economy over the years, the money doesn't actually disappear; it just moves around. And so by being able to have a flexible network around the world, we're able to support these partners, and they can do their best, and we try to teach them and support them doing their best and growing their own business. And with software, you get returns out of it over time. Some years, good years, sometimes bad years, some markets good, some years markets bad, by vertical industry. So it's a lot of fun, actually. Building an international network is very stabilizing for a business. It's very impactful in terms of spreading it out. And it's not just the classic, globalization company with franchises is all how you squeeze. We're all how you support. And people, by owning the companies in various businesses, in various markets, they're incentivized by themselves.
Yep.
So we're not
they're
trying
entrepreneurs.
They're entrepreneurs, and you take the best. These people are so cool because they just grow with us, and we learn from them too. I mean, different approaches in different settings.
And Esri, it really kind of invented a category, this GIS, this, geographic information system space. It's the dominant software company in the space. There are a lot of listeners here who are kind of working on inventing a space or kind of pioneering in a specific space, whether that, and it could be in a lot of different types of areas. Like, what advice would you give to, an up and coming company that is trying to invent a space, or even just like invent a word? I think you guys invented this kind of word GIS in a way, right? So like, how do people like think through that kind of branding kind of event as they're putting their stamp on a space?
Well, I think having an eye for what's needed and wanted is very important. And so when you're so-called inventing something, a lot of people invent things that are, that have no meaning.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, figuring out something that really serves the market or really helps somebody do something better or improve or make a difference with a technology or an invention is the key. And so be focused and grounded on something that's needed and wanted. That's been the secret of my successes. I don't try to be interesting. I try to be interested.
Yeah.
So, I've told you
that's
this
probably
before.
Good advice.
Yeah, and anybody can be interesting. You can buy a Ferrari, certain clothes, certain tassels on your shoes or whatever. But it doesn't necessarily result in a successful business.
Yep.
It may look good and make you feel good, but the good businesses really deliver great services that people need and want. And so I had a friend once who, almost everything he touched was successful. And finally I asked him, what the hell is it? He says, well, I don't try to be interesting. I try to be interested. I do what is needed. And man, that's the best advice I can give anybody.
Yeah, it probably means you need to like get off Twitter or something then.
Well, I don't know. The other element is for us here is I mentioned that we're continuously learning, all of us as individuals, but in our teams and as an organization, we're learning from our customers. They're telling us what we need to do in order to be relevant. And one of the things we do is we spend all of our money. We have great revenues coming in here, and in a public company that pay out dividends and all kinds of stuff. Yep. We don't. We pay our employees well, and we share 20% of our profits with our employees every year. It goes right into their profit sharing program. But mainly, our money goes into new innovation. Yep. So about 30% of our revenue is spent on more innovation. And when we do that innovation, it's of course guided by what's happening technically. In the world, we have to stay current, from mainframes to minis to workstations to PCs to the cloud. We have to stay current. And then the other big direction is from our users. They say, okay, Jack, we need to do this, or Sud, we need to do that. And they're cleverly, I mean, we have some really, I mean, we have, just, I want to say this humbly, and we have incredibly gifted engineering talent here, and they engineer things in holistic ways with first principles. And we're really blessed because we can do so, because we do have revenue stream, because of all the customer relationships that we have. And we take care of the customers well. I mean, our marks are very high on service and support, but also we take care of them, trying to have insight into what's needed and wanted generically for them, so that as we evolve our tools every year and we come out with releases of tools every year, it's relevant for them. It's not just some shiny object or looks cool. No, it really ultimately makes a difference.
Let's spend time diving into like the data side of it, because Esri is a software company, but it is basically built on top of data. You have kind of external data, you've got public data. Obviously, people bring in their own data into Esri, and then Esri like kind of takes that data and makes it shine, whether it's ArcGIS or Business Analyst or the different tools that you have. Like, how do you think about like the data ecosystem, and how important is that to like the success of the company?
Yeah, well, people have often said data fuels GIS and its success. Most of our customers in the government space create their own data. Parcel boundaries, they digitize them and they serve them, or forest inventories, or, road inventories or utility. They're all about creating and managing their systems of record. That's their database. It's not financial data, it's geographic data. And often they'll fly aircrafts and they'll store pictures that they interact with, these sorts of things. But in the private sector, it's a very different game. They usually want us to provide data for them to be able to, they're not about systems of record keeping, public records or so we often pull public information together and then package it in our cloud environments, so they can, this data can be made available to our customers freely. And a lot of it is open data. We actually take all the government's open data and try to organize it into application-ready data services that people can sort of mash together and use. So in the beginning, it was a big segment between private sector and public sector data and users. Now it's starting to mishmash that, public sector users are wanting to buy or access private data sets freely. So your question really is getting at, what is Esri doing in the data space, right? I mean, we build these great tools, and then we create this cloud environment, which is references our customers' data all over the world. And we have like, I think it's over 40 million data sets that we reference in our catalog in ArcGIS Online. People can access that data. But in that same space, increasingly, by the way, people like yourselves have made your data offerings available in an affordable way to our customers, and they're subscribing to your service, and it's enriching, both the public sector and the private sector. So we are sort of facilitators of getting great data to our customers. And so our imagery data, street data, your dynamic data, these are all POI data. They're all great things that our customers now are figuring out. They don't have to maintain them in their own system of record like we did 30 years ago. They can actually
the way I kind of see it with Esri, it'd be interesting. Is kind of like a flywheel. Like the more kind of different geographic data there is, the more is important to have a tool like Esri. The more people have a tool like Esri, the more people create geographic data, and there's this kind of flywheel that keeps going, which is a virtuous circle. Do you see it in a similar way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm grounded in geography, the science of our world.
Yep.
I mean, that's really the basis for it all. So how do you abstract geography? Well, I think of it as abstracting geographic knowledge. And some of those are data sets. So, whether it's vectors or rasters or surfaces or digital twins, it's basically GIS creates these data sets. And then GIS also applies these data sets in modeling and analytics things. And those models are also part of the geographic knowledge. So there's data knowledge, there's modeling knowledge, there's map cartography representation knowledge.
Yeah.
There's There's reporting knowledge, like that great map from Johns Hopkins.
Yeah,
that has been viewed
COVID.
now. Yeah, COVID 2 trillion times. I think I was
Amazing.
mentioning this to you recently. And what those guys did is they pulled data from all over the internet. They aggregated and made the data useful, and then support this interactive dashboard that has informed the world about what's going on. And that's very common with our users. They are sort of like, they hoover up or vacuum cleaner up data from wherever they can get it, as well as they maintain their own data. And sometimes they buy data and they bring it together, integrate it, and then they build great applications.
And the value of the data kind of like it grows as the more the data is getting joined together.
Yeah.
So, it's like if you put two data sets by themselves have interesting value, but when you put them together, it sometimes has 3x the value, or, it's like 1 + 1 = 3 and stuff. How do you think about these like join keys to join the data together?
Yeah, keys are fantastic, join keys. And I think the work that you're pioneering actually in this idea of having common keys that are relate keys are really important. From my perspective, one of the big relate keys is geography itself, the XY location, but also these new adventures of having the ability to integrate data with keys is, I mean, it's
right. Like I know Esri and SafeGraph, we've been involved in this like place key to figure out like for a specific place. But they're obviously you can join on a longitude and latitude. There are many different other ways to potentially join data. And a lot of this data is represented differently. The more that it can be easy to join together, you don't need this like incredible engineering team. I'm sure like Johns Hopkins, they put a lot of data in, but they probably also put a lot of effort and all this like great engineering to actually join it all together. It wasn't simple.
Pull it all together, exactly. A lot of it in that case was just tabular data. Yeah. And the reporting structure of counties and countries and zip codes, these are kind of common geographic keys that can pull data from different sources and then visualize it. Or in the case of GIS, the spatial analytics that can go on, or the big data query sorts of operations that can go on using location as a key is kind of a miraculous thing. And the world is getting better and better at doing this, being able to use these big data warehouses and then going in with spatial queries and pulling information out for analytics and representation. And we're working on that. We've been working on it for many years, obviously, but it goes from simple map overlay, where you're intersecting using geometry and taking relational data and bringing it together, doing joins and relates either dynamically or fixed, to the idea of stuffing it into a trillion, feature database and then asking it questions. These are all on the frontiers. They're all part of this, what a GIS system really does. And it's tools and it's the data. So you're right. There's this natural, exciting synergy about wanting to know what's going on, understand the world, and GIS tools or geospatial tools and mapping tools and databases with either fixed data or real-time data is going to be brought together. And by the way, this is what's necessary to create understanding in our complex world. I mean, holistic approaches, which we're going to have to deal with big issues of climate and big issues of biodiversity, big issues of making smarter cities. You've got to bring the information together so we can understand it, so that we can act in more intelligent ways.
Esri is an interesting company. You have this huge partner ecosystem, as you said earlier, and I've had the pleasure of going to a few of your big partner summits, especially in the pre-COVID days. We're all in person. There's 30,000 people there interacting in person. How do you decide, okay, this particular thing, all these different partners are providing important things to help your customers do a better job. So there are some new things that you might want to do yourself as part of Esri Inc. And there are some things that actually might be better for partners to do. How do you like think internally as to like, what should we do internally versus, what should we rely on all these partners to do?
Yeah, it's a good question. Here in the U.S., I think we're, like you said, 1.3 billion in revenue, but we drive about a 27 or 28 billion dollar ecosystem around us that builds on top of us, and some of that
Which
is
is the
data.
true definition of a platform, right? It's
That's
20x,
yeah, it's a
right?
platform.
Yeah.
We're a little tiny, tail wagging a huge footprint of technologies and solutions. And our approach is that we're now, earlier this year, you may know, we opened up the hood of Esri with open source APIs that can actually access our fundamental platform capabilities. And we've had actually, just in these couple months, thousands and thousands of developers who are doing startups that are actually embedding a very simplified API and putting maps in their apps.
Oh yeah, I play with it. It's amazing. It's incredible what you guys are doing.
It's a kind of a cool thing. But ultimately, there can be tension between what we're building here in core versus what people want to build as distinctions for their various businesses. And it hasn't really been as big of a problem as you might think, partly because our main focus is to build focused, core, first principles technology and let other people exploit it in the area of application business. And we've had a couple of application, we call them geo-enabled systems that we've had to build because there were no partners that really wanted to develop it. But generally speaking, I'd rather not do that. The one that we did in partnership and part with you as business analysts, and this is all about picking retail sites or manufacturing sites, bringing all the data together in a prepackaged form, and that's used by everybody from Starbucks to Walgreens to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of commercial organizations. But generally speaking, and again, I'll just emphasize, we tried to get people that were doing this stuff to be able to build on our platform. They didn't do it. So we simply sat down and did it. But it's a reluctant thing.
The way I see it as a partner who works with Esri, I think you do such a great job with partners. In my theory, and you could tell me if I'm right or not, but my theory about why you do such a good job goes back to some of those original things that we talked about. In some ways, you're run with a very long-term view. You're not public, so you don't have this worry about your stock price. It's like, oh, we're gonna, we need to juice the next quarter. So what other companies do is they start squeezing the partners a little bit more. They get a little bit extra percentage out of the partners and stuff. You have the ability to take a much longer-term view. Because you don't have to think in these kind of quarter to quarter. So this is my theory. I don't know. What do you think of this?
Yeah, theory? I think you're right. I mean, when we assess going into a particular market segment, we have partners. Like in utilities, we have over 100 partners. Everybody from Schneider Electric and Siemens to little small mom and pop shops that do various work. But if I wanted to say, I'm going to build the complete system for utility companies, wow, this get greedy. I could grow, blah, blah, blah. I don't need to do that. I'd rather serve those markets with great tools. They're our customers, big ones, PG&E or Edison or others, Con Ed. But they're really, I don't know. I can sleep at night and really do a great job and make breakthroughs by not having to eat all of that 10x stuff.
Now, in the last year has been really interesting. This kind of COVID year that we've just kind of gone through, and there's kind of this increasing need to understand what's happening in the physical world. And at SafeGraph, we've made our data available more to academics and researchers and journalists, and also a lot of government organizations for non-commercial purposes. And Esri's really kind of supercharge that mission as well. You really did a lot of stuff to make your software available for free to all these different organizations. How did you just think about making that decision? Because it probably has some sort of at least near-term financial cost to you to serve these things as the world's a little bit in crisis.
Yeah, well, we have a disaster response team. It's kind of a virtual team. It comes together during any disaster. And this really started way back in the Northwood earthquake back in the early 90s, and then the Mississippi floods and the Missouri floods, and where we would stand up a policy set of giving our software to the the first responders or to the NGOs or the agencies that were being impacted by the disaster. And so now there's like 20 people that work in that sort of, they sort of turn on anytime a crisis happens. And whether it's in Indonesia with this or, in Alaska with that. So that's kind of in our DNA. We sort of cover it with our overall ecosystem costs. And when COVID hit, it scared the hell out of all of us, I'm sure. We said, what can we do to really support it? So we started to build templates and then provide our software to all the ministries around the world. Worked closely with CDC, worked closely with WHO, who are our customers, but all these other ones who wanted to see what's going on in their citizens and their agencies and so on really wanted to know what the heck is going on. So I'm being a little abstract here, but I think basically,
I remember in March, April 2020, constantly being on the phone with all these different folks at Esri, and we're doing all these different things to help the governments and help them out. And then there were so many other companies that were trying to get to help, either to donate some data or do other types of things, but a lot of them were unwilling, partially because they were larger public companies. They, their lawyers were saying, I don't think, it's not that they didn't want to help, it's that they were, maybe worried about getting sued or, this other thing. Yeah. Whereas even though Esri's this massive company, you just kind of dove in. It's like you didn't even have a lawyer in the room. You could just do something. Is that just because even though it's a huge company, it's also a small company, or how did you just dive in and do it without worrying about the lawyers and stuff?
Well, I don't want this to sound self-serving. It's just part of our DNA. We jumped in, and look, we did it mostly through users and with partners. By the way, thank you for all the donation work that you and your team put together. Your data was amazing. It was the first data that allowed people to see that the executive order here in California by the governor actually was working. When I called you up, it was amazing. And the governor himself, he understood it. Who is staying home and listening to the governor, who is not.
Yep.
Well, we could see that very clearly on the maps that you had as it overlaid with the actual infections that were occurring.
Yep.
I don't know. It's I don't think it's unique to us. Everybody wants to help. And I think that's the spirit that we have to encourage entrepreneurs and large companies all over the world to really buy into. Is the COVID wave of catastrophe was, I think, only the beginning of a series of other big global challenging issues like climate and like the loss of biodiversity. And we got to figure out how we can volunteer and also run a business, how we can contribute on these big challenges that are facing us. And that's going to be a very personal thing. We are not wrestled with the need to have short-term gain on everything that we're dealing with. So having a private company that is sustainable based on support by all of our users is really a privilege that I don't take lightly. We had to take a long time to build the damn thing.
Yeah.
But it does allow us to 50
plus years. Yeah.
It does allow us to really focus on the things that we really care about as humans. So I encourage all of the listeners here to think seriously about what your real purpose is in life and see if you could build an organization that really is responsive. And I know that getting money and capital is a necessity to really growing and supporting your business. Except I'm here to tell you that it isn't absolutely necessary, because you can do it if you're patient, slow, stick to your values, keep integrity, keep your agreements, and continue working like crazy. Look, this doesn't just happen, show up, you become an executive and you show up. No, I got to tell you that, the people here work their ass off. And we still do day and night. And we don't take that as a casual thing. It's a privilege to be able to be in this organization and do what we do.
Well, a couple before we leave, just a couple personal questions. So, I often say to SafeGraph employees that the only job I'd rather have than being like the CEO of SafeGraph is the CEO of Esri, because it's just like and I think it must be like the best job in the world. Like, do you ever just like pinch yourself and or do you write like a gratitude journal? I mean, you get to do these like amazing things every day.
Well, I do have a privileged position. I know that because I can see the amazing work and dedication, particularly in the public sector. The public service work that's going on is just amazing. So I appreciate my job. Are you suggesting that I step aside and you're going to take it over?
Definitely not. No, definitely. I don't think I could do it better than you.
Worried.
But do you write like I mean, I don't know. Do you have like do you write like gratitude, or do you just like, I don't know, is there some way where you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing? Or how do you like think about this like great, and you get to do all these like amazing things every day?
I think I appreciate the work that I get an opportunity to do. I also believe that you get there by really working hard and creating your situation. Everybody creates their own situation, and everybody has to figure out who they serve. In life, this is a big thing. Do you serve your family? Do you serve your spouse? Do you serve your community? Do you serve the public market? Do you serve your stockholders? Who do you serve? So by keeping life quite simple from the business perspective, I get a chance to serve on the big issues that I really think I care about, which is conservation, education of kids, and then also building cool tools that empower and allow our users to really do a better job. And that's thrilling. And I don't take it lightly. I mean, competition is here, technology is changing, the world is in crisis, but in our little world, I get to play hard. Not everybody, can drive a race car, and it's tough to drive a race car, as you know. I mean, you come into the corners, and how much do you let off the gas so that you can make it around the corner, or how much do you keep your foot on the gas so that your competitor doesn't pass you up? So life is, in a way, like if you're playing at 100%, then life is like driving a race car. And I like to play at 100%, and I like my colleagues to play at 100%. And building an organization where you have the opportunity to play at 100% without some of the constraints of this or that, that takes time, but it's totally doable. And life is too short not to play at 100%. That's my view.
I love that. All right. Last question. We asked this to all of our guests, but what would you tell yourself back in like high school, college to save yourself either time or money or emotional well-being today? Like if you go back in time and tell the young Jack, what advice would you give yourself?
Well, the thing that was always in the back of my head was just make it through this one. I didn't have any grand vision of being someplace. It was, okay, just finish this quarter at university. I was not a very good student, but I learned how to learn in university. Before that, just for dyslexic problems I had, it was very hard for me to read and hard to do a lot of things. But overcoming that was just intensive work in university to learn how to learn. And my phrase was always, okay, just make it through this quarter. Just make it through 1 year of college and your life will be better,
Yeah.
Or, okay, just make it through college, get a degree, and then it'll be okay. Just making it through, then later we started it. Just make it through this quarter.
It's almost like, the Woody Allen advice, like just show up. Just make sure you're showing up and getting there.
Right. Or something. Yeah. And some of it is showing up, but also some of it is working, with a sense of purpose and keep learning from it. I mean, I don't have any great single mentors. I'm learning from everybody, and everybody seems to help me. I love that idea. And they do. If you're willing to be open and not so egotistical, the world really wants to help you. And I think that's true with all entrepreneurs. People don't like ego and I'm something and I'm great. Yep. They just sort of, okay, I guess I don't need to help that person. But if you really are open and intentional in doing good, the world opens up for you.
Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being our guest today. This has been really helpful. And I've learned a lot, Jack.
You're a great guy. I greatly admire you. I'm so glad that person opened my office and we got a chance to meet each other. It was a good thing, actually. I'm very sincere about that. So anyway, good luck to you. Good luck to all of your listeners.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the show, consider leaving a review. For more World of DaaS, and that's DAAS, DaaS, you could subscribe right here on our YouTube channel, or you could find me on Twitter at Auren, Auren, Auren. I'd love to hear from you.